So in this video, we are going to be demonstrating the sight measuring method, which is a little more challenging compared to a grid method, because in the sight measuring method, we are not actually using a grid. It's more spontaneous, it's more organic, but it's similar to the grid method in that you will be actually using references that exist within the picture itself. So you will be choosing your references and you will be using sight measuring in order to measure the relative proportions by sight. You can also use a pencil, you can use a ruler. So if you've noticed, some artists would use the pencil to like point at their subject. For instance, the subject is right in front of you and it's not a photograph. You would see some artists use their pencil and then they would like uh, point the pencil towards the subject, and then they would like move their thumb just to see where the measurements are and then compare. So that's the basic principle. You can use a ruler, so a short ruler could also be convenient, so at least you can tell that whether it's on paper or if the subject's in front of you, you can more or less find the proportions of each of the sections of the image that you're copying. So this will take some getting used to. For the more advanced of you, those who are already used to this or those who have the knack for this, you're less dependent on a measuring instrument. But for those who are beginners, you might want to use some kind of short ruler for this. For this particular demo and for your exercises, for for the exercise session, you can actually put your ruler against the photo. There's no problem with that. But eventually, for the graded portion of this lesson, you would need you would have the original image in front of you, and you won't be able to use a ruler to to do these kind of measurements. You're gonna have to do it mostly by sight. So it's a bit of a quick training on your part, and for those who are beginners might feel intimidated by this, but our goal is different compared to the grid method. In the grid method, we're going for a lot of accuracy because you have a grid. For the sight measuring method, we'll be a little more lenient when it comes to the accuracy, but it should not be too inaccurate that we know that we'd like to see you try this as intensely as you can, particularly for the beginners. So I'm now going to transfer this image. I'm not going to go for the background. I'm just going to move our little dragon over here, and maybe I'm going to increase the size a little bit. So when you're doing this, the first thing that you have to do is to establish how large your drawing will be. Because what you don't want to happen is you start with a part, because a lot of beginners do this. They start with a portion of the image. They start drawing, let's say I want to draw the eyes first and then the mouth. And because they did not really estimate the sizes, when it gets to the tail, they find out they don't have enough space for the tail. So that's the reason why you would need to set the boundaries first. And then once you have the boundaries, then you work with what's inside those boundaries. So this is what's going to happen. I'm just going to take my ruler and I'm just going to measure. So the first part is not really about measuring, but right now you can see that it's like more or less a 13.5 centimeters. Here, I think it's a little more. Yeah, it's a little better. It's a 5.5 in height. But for our purposes, I'm just going to establish I want my drawing maybe to be this high. Okay, so what happens, since I've established this border, this entire dragon should fit here. Okay, So you can have it bigger, you can have it smaller, but we also have to take into consideration the width. So if my height is 5.5 inches, and then my width now is more or less, I'm just gonna move it over here. It's close to 5, or it's about exactly 5. So it's a little shorter than the height. So if my height is around here, it's around 6.5, I can go around a little, around 5, that. So it's a little shorter than this because this is now a 5.5 and this is a 5 inches. So I more or less estimate that this would be shorter than the height. So now, because I've established these boundaries, I can now place the dragon in here knowing that I have space all around and there's no chance for me to actually go over the page. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up those boundaries. We're going to set up where where our landmarks are. So in order for to do that, you can do this however way you want. What's your goal is to find the right divisions where you want to place those landmarks. You can choose whatever part of the original and just transfer those boundaries over here. So for example, the easiest one I can see, the easiest one, and maybe you've seen it, you can see it, the easiest one would be this. This is a nice straight line going down the back of the dragon. And if I point my ruler over here, I can see that that back is around one and close to 1.5, close to 1.5. Maybe it's about 25% of the whole width. So I'm going to estimate that this is 1/2. Then this back, the back would be here. I'm going to establish that there. So I know that this will be here. So I'm just going to establish that boundary. I'm not drawing anything yet. I'm just plotting things out. And this is one way for you to keep things clean, because if you do it straight away, then you might end up with something that's really, really messy. So the next one might be this one, where this, I'm not really sure what this is called, but I'm just going to make an allowance because it's this high. I'm just going to make a, you can make educated guesses here. So I'm just going to bring it there. So I have that. And then I'm going to see where this is, where that is. So there, if it's 5 inches as the width, and this is around 1 3/4. So that's around 30%. 30% from here. So that's around 1/3, maybe around here. Okay, so I know that this is where this one is gonna be. Okay, so I have that, and of course this edge is here. So I think I can confidently move because I already have this boundary and the one here. I can start with that curve going down very roughly. I'm using I'm using HB. Normally you would want to use something a bit lighter so that it's easy to erase, but you don't want to push the pencil down too much that it creates a dent on the page. You don't want to do that. So the next thing is it moves quickly towards here. So this really curved part here, and then it moves down here really quickly. So I'm just going to attempt to do that there. And then I'm going to move down. So I can see that from here to here, if I'm going to take this into consideration over to this border, this part is somewhere in the middle between this and this. So we established our line, this line as here, then we have this part as here. I'm going to move 1/2 to find this area. So now I have that. And I'm going to move down. And I'm not going all the way here. So maybe around there. Okay. And I know that this part is here, so we can just do something there. So this is like, you're basically plotting everything and using, as you build each line, it now becomes a new reference for everything else. So I have that, I have this, and then because I already have the back side, I can now curve that and merge that with here. Round that a bit more because that looks really, really rounded. And then what I'm going to try and find out is this top part would be more or less aligned. It's aligned with this one. So I'm just going to put that up, and then I'm going to have my first, what, I have no idea, a fin. I'm just going to call this a fin for lack of a better word. Just going to curve this. And then I'm going to find out where this aligns. So it's a little below. It's a little below this part. So I'm just going to assume that it's around there. So I'm just going to align that and then curve that with that as the boundary. And then move that down. And we have there. Okay. So we have more or less the general outline, and I can now estimate we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I have 8. So this part over here, we can see that it aligns over there. It aligns here. So where that curve goes down, I know that on the opposite end, I can place 4. So I'm just going to estimate that 4. 1. I can extend this a bit more. Small one. So I have that. And then all I have to do, I have 4 right here. I have 1 over here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I can just build that. This one shoots a little farther than that. So that's going to be maybe there. This one is a little more inward. So we can do that. 1, 2, and then I have 2 more. So I can scoop that there. So that's the third. And a little one starting. So again, it doesn't have to be really, really accurate. You can just go as accurate as you can, as long as you know that you're following a reference. So those initial references are very crucial because once you start placing your lines down and they're not very accurate, everything else, no, it's like a domino effect. Everything follows. So we try to start with as accurate as possible so that we can, when we build those other lines, we know that we're more or less safe. So I'm going to add now this. It's one arm. So it's a one-armed dinosaur. Okay, so now I'm looking at the possibility that I may have, yes, I may have placed this a little too much. So again, if you've drawn these lightly, then you'll be able to erase them a little more easily. Okay. And now the eyes. So what can I now use as a reference for the eyes? I can use this as a reference for the eyes right here. I can use this for a reference of the eyes. And I can actually use this curve. So if you look at this curve, it swoops up and hits the middle of the eye. So you can do that. You can use that as references as well. So I'm just going to, although this is kind of risky, I admit it's kind of risky, but let's see what happens. So I have one eye over here. So that's around, yeah, so it's over here in the latter part or the earlier part. And then I have one around there. It's not as circular as this. And then I now have there. So from here, it's pretty okay. You'll notice that I have a bit, do I have a lot of chin here? It's possible that I do have a lot of chin compared to this one. So maybe I can just, just bring this in just a bit more. And that's okay. So, and then I'm just going to fix the other parts. Okay, so we have now more or less the basic contours of our dinosaur. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my kneadable eraser. I'm just going to take out a lot of those lines. So I'm left with more ghostly lines. And then we can continue with the so this is what I like about the kneadable eraser. You can just roll it like clay. It's going to pick things up. So now that you have you've erased a lot of the dark lines, you now can start making more detailed or more precise decisions where you want to lay those cleaner lines. I'm just going to dive in here and just make some of those little micro decisions as I go. So again, the goal is not to be 100% accurate unless you really want to be professional at this. This entire exercise is not so much, well, yes, it's about drawing, but it's also about paying attention to the details, because when you when you get into any kind of like design field or art field, the details will matter. So this drawing activity, or learning how to draw, is actually one way to train yourself. It forces you to really look at the smaller things. Now, once you're done with this, then you can start mapping out the values. Okay, I'm just concerned about, should I change? I'm just going to move those down a bit. I'm not too satisfied with the position of the eyes. I'm just going to bring them down. That forehead over here looks a bit wide, so I'm just going to Let's bring those down. So that looks a little bit better. And then this one looks a little more straight down. Okay. So we got that. Okay. So the next thing that you're going to do, once you have this, it's now you're going to, in this case, I'm just going to do the easy part. So the easy part, we have the eyes. And then, of course, there's the, for the fins. Okay, so if these are not called fins, then, you know, I'm sorry, but I could always ask Google, but I'm busy drawing, so. So I'm just mapping out this part. So you can see that strong line over there. That's what I'm mapping out. And then I'm just going to let that fade a bit. Maybe use some hatching lines. So if you were a professional, you might use, you know, one of those smudging tools. But, you know, that's not the kind of drawing we're making. So you can use your rendering marks. In this case, I'm just doing some hatching, some light hatching over here. Made a mistake there. So there is that division over there. And you're just going to continue this. Now at this point, I'm just going to have to move to a lighter pencil because this HB pencil is kind of dark. If I want to achieve more subtle gradations in the shading, I would need a lighter pencil. So I might just go grab an H pencil, maybe. So I have an H right here, so hopefully it's not going to be that dark. To start off with this area over here, which still using the HB for that little dark. So that's called an occlusion. So an occlusion shadow, that's the kind of shadow that that's an area that receives a really small amount of light, if any at all. So that's called an occlusion shadow. Here I'm just going to like do some really fine, very light hatching. I think I need something that's lighter than a 2H. But anyway, so let's just continue doing this. So I'm just eyeballing the whole thing, where those dark areas are. And that more or less covers the thing. Okay, so I'm just gonna add one last touch would be, because we do have that shadow underneath, we're just going to and we have our copy. So that's the demonstration for now. And ideally what we want to do is you want to start with simple images and then work your way up. And again, note that at the very beginning of this exercise, what I did, I wasn't thinking about, I'm just going to draw a cute dragon. I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking about where are the boundaries, what references can I set up? And then once I've set up those boundaries, that's when I start to connect the lines, connect the curves and all that, and make adjustments along the way. So thank you very much for watching, and all the best to you.